Okay, let's go ahead and dive right in. Thanks for joining me in my little corner of my office here with my little buddy. This is my little buddy right here from Australia. He's going to help me read. We may or may not get a guest appearance in here from Liz or the dogs. But what we're here to do, I thought with everything that was going on and all of us getting cabin fever and looking for ways to entertain ourselves, not only would it entertain me, but hopefully it would entertain you as well, to do a reading of my book Starstuff, which has been out for a couple years. Still, hello, Cooper. Hi, Coops. Coop's going to lay behind the camera, so you can't see him, but maybe we'll get him to say hi in a minute. But I'm going to read, I think, the first couple chapters today. But the plan is to do the whole book of my book Starstuff, which I finished writing a couple years ago. Still working on the second book, which has been a challenge, but making headway on that literally every day. This is the chair that I sit in when I'm not writing at work, where I write from home. So that book will be out eventually. But this is the first book of a planned trilogy called Starstuff. And let me go ahead and read the back of it here before we dive into it. This was the amazing blurb that I had written for me by someone who's really good at writing blurbs. So this is Starstuff. Abandoned and deprived of his legacy, one boy must cross the galaxy to save the father he never knew. Petrick longs for a life outside his backwater orphanage. In his parentless prison, even talking with his friends about the science that spurred space travel and colonization is forbidden. When Petrick sleeps at night and dreams, he envisions lessons from the most famous scientist of the fringe worlds, his father. On one fateful night, the lessons turn into cries for help, and it's up to Petrick, his dog, and his friends to escape and find his father. But the worlds beyond their home planet are more treacherous than they ever could have imagined. On their quest, they encounter space pirates, advanced androids, and growing unrest that could tear the galaxy apart. As he moves closer to finding his father, revelations arise that could put the entire journey in jeopardy. The success of his quest may lie in discovering that blood isn't the only thing that determines your family. All right, and let's go ahead and dive right in, shall we? I'm going to put my little lap desk here to make it a little easier to hold this book, and so you don't see the top of my head the whole time I'm reading. Starstuff by Ira Heineken. For my wife. That's the dedication. This book wouldn't have been finished without her. Chapter 1. 10 seconds. The man who would save the galaxy needed saving. Watching the ticking of the chronometer, he stroked the sides of his shrieking ship. Her metal bulkheads were hot to the touch. She was crying out in pain with every shudder and shake. A maelstrom of intractable gravity and mass burned outside her with an orange-yellow light, and it was tearing her apart. If that happened before the man could send off his distress call, all would be lost. But if he could last till the coming break in the storm and send his desperate plea, there was a chance. There would be time. 9 seconds. The thing about distress calls is that they're supposed to be simple. In the ancient days when humanity sailed the wine-colored seas, a mayday signal was waving one's arms over their head, shooting off a red explosive, orange smoke, or smoke of any kind, or the transmission of 3 dots, 3 dashes, and 3 dots. Anyone within range would respond, rushing as quickly as they could. 8 seconds. But this man sailed the dark skies of the cosmos, and his message couldn't be dots or dashes. It couldn't be simple, and it couldn't cause just anyone to come rushing in to help. What this man had discovered inside the cosmic whirlwind railing against his ship was the kind of thing that would change everything. Like fire, or the splitting of the atom. It would build entire civilizations, and it would wipe them to dust. It would obliterate lives, and it would elevate them. Such a discovery had to be borne on the right shoulders, not just anyone's. 7 seconds. The man finished his check of his meticulously crafted message one last time. It had to be perfect. A box that could only be opened with the right key. A ball of string that could only be unraveled by the right person. The carrier frequency would deliver the message to only one recipient. A boy on a lonely backwater world. Of that he was sure. The message inside would unravel as the right conditions, such as space and time, were met, and the right questions answered. Of that, the man had only hope. Such layers and complexity were a risk in a distress call, but a risk he had to take. 6 seconds. The seconds seemed longer the closer to the end of the countdown they got. The man wasn't sure if it was his own perception, or if the time dilation effect was that dramatic to visibly slow time over a mere 2 or 3 feet. 5 seconds. His ship screamed. Just a little longer, he cooed to her. She would save him if she held, just as surely as would the recipient of his distress call. The man wondered if he was ready, the boy who had received this desperate call. From inside the vortex, it was impossible to know exactly how much time had passed out there, but the man knew the time dilation effect was there. He'd observed it on the way in. Out there in normal space, it had been years, maybe decades. The man prayed he'd be old enough, wise enough, strong enough. 4 seconds. The man knew it would work. The boy would answer the call to adventure. He'd accept the challenge. He had to. 3 seconds. A bulkhead next to the man cracked open, bathing the cabin with angry amber light. It whipped the air into a frenzy. 2 seconds. On his monitors, the man saw a break in the storm's swirling clouds of gas, rock, and energy. It cracked open like the bulkhead, like an eye in the middle of a hurricane. It was just big enough to slip a transmission through, and it was right on time. 1 second. It would be open for less than a second. It was already starting to close. 0. The man slapped his control panel, seemingly in slow motion. It felt like an eternity for the round button to respond with its tactile click, but the distress call was transmitted. Moving faster than light and devoid of mass or matter, it was held by no constraints of the vortex, and it charged through the crack in the half-second it appeared. The storm sealed again behind it. It was done. The message was away. The fate of the galaxy was all on the boy now. There would be time. The man closed his eyes and keyed a final instruction to his dying ship. It wailed with a new sound as its engines fired. The ship moved further inside the maelstrom. He thought of the boy and pictured him standing on his small, dusty, and safely insignificant world. He would be staring up at the stars, wondering where his place was in the universe. "Come find me," he whispered to him. And then time stopped. That's chapter 1. I'm going to take a drink of water. And make sure that we're still streaming here, and it looks like we are. Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm not super easy or able to respond to comments, but I can see there. Hi, Azalea. Hi, Brandon. Thanks for watching, guys. All right, chapter 2. Igniter, please, Clark. Carefully. A pancake-shaped disc plopped down into Petrick's outstretched hand. Gently, ever so gently, he pushed the disc into the bottom of the rocket fuselage. It clicked into place. He frowned. "That's not an end cap, that's a fuel cell," he said, and he turned to his assistant, who had his tongue out and mouth open wide. "You think we need another fuel cell?" Clark pinned his 2 furry ears back against his tiny head and barked, which Petrick took as dog speak for a yes. "If you say so." Petrick then grabbed another fuel cell and gave Clark a sly wink. "Let's go for it, eh, bud? Just don't tell Dad." The two of them looked across the field at Fenton, the renowned scientist of the fringe worlds. He was wholly engrossed in whatever he was scribbling on the blackboard in front of him, and he hadn't yet noticed Petrick wasn't doing his study work. Petrick held the rocket up to the clear night sky and inspected it, using the light of Indicar's summer moons. It was shortly after twilight, but the two moons were already shimmering and full. Their silver light glinted over Petrick's work table, which was piled high and full with all manner of scientific and mechanical clutter, wires, glass tubes, gears, circuit boards, and books all sprawled chaotically across its surface. It must have been quite the odd sight. The boy, the man, the table, and the schoolhouse blackboard all sitting smack dab in the middle of an open meadow. They were the only sign of civilization or humanity in all directions, as far as the eye could see. The field was flat, with knee-high wild grass, and surrounded on all sides by the old Indicaran forest. The only sounds beyond Fenton's preoccupied mumblings were the gurgle of frogs and the occasional buzz of a glowbug. "It looks good," Petrick said, after he'd turned the rocket all the way around a couple of times. "Hopefully it will be good enough to go really super high." Clark panted in approval. Petrick set up the wire model rocket stand in the middle of the work table and, with a few shoves, cleared the area around it. No sense in setting everything on fire, right? He reached for the control box with the ignition button on it and held it out to Clark. "Set us up out there a ways." Petrick pointed off into the meadow beyond the table. "But do not press that button until I get there." Clark took the box in his small mouth and sped off into the grass. The box's wire unraveled behind him as a silver trail. Petrick gingerly slid the small rocket, packed with incendiaries, down onto the stand. With equal care, he leaned in with the two contacts at the end of the wires that connected to the control box. Petrick looked at his father. The blackboard still preoccupied him completely. He was none the wiser. Click. First connector in. Petrick looked over his shoulder at Clark, who was half hidden by the high grass. His head was up and alert, and the control box was still in his mouth. He was staring at Petrick, waiting dutifully. Petrick motioned for him to stay there and not move. Once the second connector was in, the slightest press of the ignition button, or even the tiniest short in the system, and things would get explosive, right in his face. Petrick inhaled. Click. Second connector in. The rocket hadn't exploded. Petrick let out a soft whistle of relief, backed away from the table, and ran quietly over to the waiting Clark. He gave him a quick head scratch. He'd been a good boy. This far away from the work table, with only the lights of the moons for illumination, the rocket was a shadow. Petrick took the control box from Clark and took a deep breath in through a giant grin. This was so much more fun than reading about thermodynamics. And all those extra fuel cells were going to make that thing explode. "Here goes nothing," Petrick whispered to Clark, who lowered himself down onto the grass in anticipation. Petrick pressed the ignition button. Nothing happened. Petrick frowned and pressed it again. Still nothing. He held it up to his ear and jiggled. Whoosh! The rocket blasted off from the work table in a brilliant flash of orange fire and white smoke. Petrick whooped in surprise. Fenton spun around at the loud sound. The rocket shot straight up and true toward the night sky, a perfect launch. Higher and higher and higher it climbed. "Wait for it!" Petrick yelled out as he counted in his head for the grand finale. "Should be right about now." Boom! An eruption of pink, blue, and green lit up the meadow as the explosive stage caught fire, and the rocket shattered into a million colored pieces. It was beautiful. It was awesome. "Petrick!" Fenton's yell rang out over the sizzling sounds of the dying rocket. Petrick thought he was in trouble, but when he looked at his father, he saw him pointing at something else. A fragment of the rocket hadn't exploded. It was the bottom two fuel cells, the ones Clark had insisted he include, that naughty dog, and they were smoldering. And they were falling right toward Fenton and the blackboard. "Watch out, Dad!" With another flash, the last two cells caught fire. Their trajectory couldn't have been more perfect had Petrick planned it out himself. They bullseyed Fenton and his blackboard in less time than Petrick had to shield his eyes. With a pop, the cells hit. Everything was on fire. The work table, the blackboard, and Fenton disappeared into the fire. One might have quite reasonably been alarmed or panicked as the flames billowed out in every direction, but Petrick only groaned. His shoulders slumped, and he trudged reluctantly toward the destruction, with Clark bounding gleefully ahead of him. The dog leapt into the flames, and Petrick followed close behind. And all the flames froze. Fenton was standing in the center of them, with his arms folded. Soot covered his face, but he was otherwise entirely unharmed. "I thought you were reading." Petrick kicked at a box of wires and circuits engulfed in frozen fire. "I was." Fenton gave his son a look. Petrick stared at the ground. The laughter that came next surprised even Clark, who barked in response. Petrick looked up to see his father doubled over, looking at the utter destruction around them. "You have to admit," the grown man gasped, "that your aim couldn't have been more perfect." Petrick began to laugh too. It was true. He'd destroyed everything. "But wasn't it great?" he said. Once his laughter died down enough for him to stand upright again, Fenton waved a hand over the scene, and the fire disappeared. Exploded papers and bits of glass, wire, and other bobs moved in time reverse back to where they'd been before the disaster. "There we go," Fenton said. He was smiling and holding Petrick's rocket, as it had been before it exploded, in his hands. The soot was still on his face, and Petrick giggled. "What?" Petrick pointed it out, and Fenton let out a "ha!" and ran a hand over himself. When he finished the gesture, he was clean again. "You made this?" Fenton asked his son, his attention back on the rocket. Petrick nodded. "I thought you were working on the EM saucer for your choosing day project." "Oh, that's done already. Plus, no way Susie and Barry would ever go for a rocket on choosing day. This was just for fun, tonight." Fenton stepped forward and handed it over to him. "It's very impressive, though I think you made a mistake adding the extra engines on the back there." "I wanted it to get all the way up to them," Petrick pointed at the moons. "I mean, rockets are how real ships get up there, right?" "More or less." Fenton tousled his son's hair, then wagged a finger at him. "Tell me next time. We can make one together." "I wanted to surprise you, and it was Clark's idea anyway." Clark was sitting and panting with a broad smile, pink tongue lolling without a single trace of remorse. "Mission accomplished, you scoundrels." The man looked over at his chalk-filled blackboard. "I suppose I was a bit engrossed tonight, wasn't I?" "What are you working on?" Fenton collapsed himself down on the ground and patted the grass next to him. "I'll show you." Petrick sat. The grass was cool, in contrast to the warm summer air. Fenton reached up to the sky and with a gesture pulled the stars and the moons down into his palm. "Ooh," said Petrick. "I was plotting out the night sky," Fenton said from behind the stars. "I figured we could start going through and identifying nearby systems, and move out from there." Petrick reached out and touched one of the tiny globes of light. "What's this one?" "Let's see." Fenton made a flipping gesture with his free hand, and the stars rotated around until the one Petrick had touched was in front of him. "That's FW005630. Petrick wrinkled his nose. "That's its name?" "It's a planetless star system, and there are so many systems that usually only the ones that get settled get real names. Like Indikar." "That's right." Fenton lay down in the grass, and with a toss, threw the night sky back up into place. "May my ship never drop anchor and forever sail the dark sky," Fenton said with a sigh. "Blessed be the stuff." What was that? A saying, the opening line of the Starfarers' Creed. Starfarers? Yes, those same ones who way back when used rockets, kind of like yours, to lift off their planets and explore up there. He pointed at a strip of the night sky that glowed a bit brighter than the rest. "See that there, where the stars are closer together?" Petrick nodded. "That's the galactic cluster. That's where Starfarers came from originally. Where we all did, if you go back far enough." "How far away is it?" "A few tens of thousands of light years." "Tens of thousands?" "Sure, but that's why they used Starstuff." Petrick knew where his father was going with the topic. "Is that why they say blessed be the stuff? Stuff means Starstuff?" "That's exactly right. It's incredibly important to them. Holy, almost. There would be no Starfarers without Starstuff, or Indikar, for that matter. There would be no strange worlds, no dark sky to sail. Because Starstuff makes it possible to go faster than light." Fenton nodded. "With a Starstuff drive, you can make the galactic cluster in a couple of weeks." "That's still a long time." Better than 50,000 years, though, huh? Petrick sighed. He lay down next to his father. And that's why you left? To find more of the star stuff? Fenton nodded. That's right. Where does it come from? Well, star stuff is actually inside you right now. Petrick looked at him to see if his father was putting him on. Fenton just smiled and nodded. It's true. Every atom in your body, Petrick, came from the same single source, a dying star. You mean like the elements from my body, from the core when a star goes nova or supernova? I do. Where all of the heavier elements are formed. And star stuff particles are in that mix too, in very, very small amounts. They get ejected when the star collapses and spread out across space. That's why they call it star stuff. So then why did you need to leave to find more? Fenton closed his eyes. Certain bits of matter have much higher concentrations of star stuff, and we know hardly anything about those special bits of matter or where they come from. And you're up there trying to find that? Petrick pointed at the stars. That's right. I'm looking for the source. Petrick closed his eyes and imagined himself setting foot onto a new world nothing like Indikar. Maybe it had 5 moons. Maybe it was all pink, and maybe the grass moved and wiggled when you lay down in it. What's it like up there, Dad? It's everything you can dream. Stars 100 times bigger than ours in colors like blue and red, purple nebulas, diamonds the size of Clark, a wall of asteroids that stretches out and towers above you as far as you can see. And pirates? Sure. And ships the size of the dining hall at Childers, 100 times the size of the dining hall, the gathering hall, and your dormitory combined. It's the greatest adventure you'll ever go on, and it lasts forever up there. It just keeps on going. I want to go. You will, someday soon. When you come home? When I come home. Petrick inhaled deeply and let it out slow, calming the rush of images filling his mind. He listened to his father's breathing next to him, steady and comforting. I miss you, Dad, he said. I miss you too, son. Petrick felt the sting of loneliness, of cold, but he let it be blown away by another whisper of the summer breeze. The two lay there, soaking in the quiet. An insistent bark from Clark jerked Petrick upright. Did you hear that? He asked. Fenton didn't rouse. 3 more barks sounded in rapid succession, and Petrick looked around in the meadow, searching for any movement that would give away the dog's location. Bark! Bark! Clark's barking, Dad. Wake up! Fenton didn't move. Bark! 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 Dad! Wake up! Clark's barking was now frantic, and Petrick got to his feet, whirling himself around to find him. Something wasn't right. Fenton remained silent and still. The meadow was darkening unnaturally, so that even the stars were beginning to fade. Dad! Petrick grabbed his arm and shook it. It dawned on Petrick that he felt as if he were floating to the bottom of some great sea. Bark, 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 bark! Wake up! And that's the end of chapter 2. How did we do? That was almost exactly half an hour. Awesome. I think I'm gonna have to get myself a bookmark, but I think I'm gonna end there. And that was perfect. We were able to get through 2 chapters. So, yeah, guys, if you guys liked that and want me to continue, I think maybe same time and place tomorrow we'll pick up with chapter 3 and do a couple chapters a day until we finish the book. Let's see, how many chapters do I have? That would take us, I think there's 48 chapters. Yeah, 48 chapters, so 24 days. If I do it every day, maybe I'll do it Monday through Friday. I don't know. We'll see. We'll feel it out. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I really hope you enjoyed it. And let's do this again tomorrow, shall we?